This conference will now be recorded.
Hi friends, in our previous session we discussed about what is Git and what is GitHub, and in today's session we'll discuss more about Git. So what is Git? So Git is a version control system. So what is the use of version control system? So for each commit, so if you are making some changes on your source code and you are committing, so each time a unique ID will be created, means a snapshot ID will be created, and the changes will be stored in your local repository. So that is called Git repository. So now let's talk about more about Git. So what is Git? Git is a distributed version control system, and no need to connect to your central server. So by using Git, no need to connect to your central server, can work without internet connection. So if you are working on your project, so you don't need to commit your code to the GitHub repository. Every time you don't need to commit to your GitHub repository. So if you look into this diagram, see, this is your GitHub. So if you look into this, so first, this is your local working directory. So where you are making some changes or you are writing some code. So assume this is your IDE. So the IDE might be STS or Eclipse. So now, so first, whenever you install Git, first you need to install Git. Whenever you install a Git, a local repository will be created. So first, so now from this IDE to, you need to move your code to local repository. First step is you need to move your code to local repository. So first add your file to Git and one index will be created, and after that commit the code. So whenever you are making some Git commit, so what will happen is the code will be moved to your local repository. Whenever you are making push Git push, so then the code will be moved to GitHub. So what is GitHub? So GitHub is a cloud-based repository. What is Git? Git is a version control system which will maintains the track of all your changes. So whenever you are committing, so one snapshot will be created. Again, you are making some changes. Again, you are committing. So another snapshot will be created with the changes. So if you want to revert back to your previous changes, yes, you can revert back. So that is a use of version control system. So Git is a version control system. GitHub is a cloud-based repository where you can store your project related code. So now first, whenever you are making some changes, so in your local working directory, so you need to add those files to your Git. So first Git add, and after that Git commit. So if you are using Git commit, so that data will be stored at your local repository, not at Git repository, sorry, GitHub, not at GitHub. So if you look into this, say no need to connect to your central server. See, every time you no need to connect to your central server. So move your changes into local repository. Once everything is done, then push. Now next point is can work without internet connectivity. See, if you want to move your code to GitHub, then only you require a internet connectivity. But if you are working on your project in your local, so first thing is you need to install Git into your system. So whenever you install a Git, a local repository will be installed. Git local repository. So Git, sorry, something is. So Git local repository will be installed into your system. So without internet, you can move your files to your local repository. Once everything is moved into local repository, you push your files to your remote repository. That is GitHub. See? So that's why without internet connectivity also you can use. No single failure point, because if you look into our previous session, see, Git is a distributed version control system. It's not a centralized, unlike traditional centralized. It's a distributed version control system. So there is no point of failure. There is no single point of failure. So developers can work independently and merge their work later. Every copy of Git repository can serve either as a server or as a client. Git track the changes. So your Git will track the changes. So not the version. So as we discussed, so when developers are working, so what will happen? So till here. So this is a Git repository. Whenever you are installing a Git into your system, a local repository will be created. So first you need to commit your code to, already we discussed this, into your local repository. So here developer is working on some IDE. So now first he need to add those files to your Git repository, and after that they need to commit to your Git repository. After that, by push, so they will move their code to Git repository. So for, till here, so no need of internet connectivity, right? Because your code is in your local system and your local Git repository also at your local system. So you no need to have any internet connectivity. And each developer will have his own repository. That's why no single failure. No need to no need to commit your code into central repository each time, unlike traditional system. First, move your code to local repository by using git commit, and after that by using git push, you move the code to Git repository. So that's why. And one more thing, Git. So last point, Git track the changes, not the version. So this is the advantage of Git. So is Git for me? Yeah. So Git will supports all the types of project. So the people who are working on primarily working on source code, so then you can use Git. Anyone wanted to track the edits, review the history of changes, anyone wanted to share merge the changes. So Git is useful for all the developers who is working on the source code. Anyone want to track their changes, review the history of changes, so and anyone wants to share and merge the changes. So how it will maintain, because Git is a version control system, right? So it will maintain the changes history. So every time you are making some changes, so it will create a snapshot on the changes. So if you are making 10 commits on a particular file, so what will happen, it will maintain the 10 snapshots with the changes. So the popular languages can use the Git. So whoever is a developer who is writing some code, source code, so then you can use Git. So if you are working on HTML project, CSS project, or Java script, or Python, ASP, Scala, Java, Perl, Ruby, C++, like any source code related project, you can use Git. Not useful for images, movies, PDF files, etc. So if your project, you are writing some code, then you want to have a track of your changes. So then you can go for Git. Git is not suitable for PDFs, movies, like that. So now first you need to install Git into your system to work with your Git repository. So with your Git, means Git is a version control system, right? So you need to install Git into your local system. Once you install the Git into your local system, what will happen? So it will create a one local repository. So first commit your changes to your local repository, and after that push the changes to GitHub repository, which is a cloud-based repository. So first you need to install Git. So we'll discuss that later, how to install and all those things. Now first install the Git, and so two-tier architecture. So our traditional systems will use two-tier architecture only. So two-tier architecture means, see here, developers, developer 1, developer 2, developer 3, and here we'll have a one system which is acting as your server, means to store the code. So you will install some SVN or CSV, concurrent version control system. So developer 1 also commits the code to here, developer 2, developer 3, developer 3, developer 4 also commits the code directly to your repository, whatever may be the repository. So this is my repository. So, and this is a traditional system. So these are the development systems and default. So this is one system which is your code base. So this is also one system, but here the point of failure is, so there is a high risk. So once this system is crashed, you will lose everything. So here two-tier architecture only, work position and repository. So this is my repository. This system is acting as my repository. So directly developers are interacting with repository. So if the repository system is crashed, you will lose everything. So that is a disadvantage of your two-tier architecture. So when you're going to three-tier architecture, so see, first, so when it comes to this Git, so what will happen? See, Git, each developer will have its local repository. So he's a developer 1, he's having his local repository. Developer 2, he is also having his local repository. Developer 3, he is also having his local repository. So first they will move the code to local repository, and from there they can move to GitHub repository, like this. So three-tier architecture. So so first working, add to index, and after that commit. So this is a local repository only, but here no single point of failure, because each developer will have its own local repository, and each developer will move his changes to remote repository, and each developer will pull the changes from other developer regularly. So there is no single point of failure. See, first this developer move his code to his local repository, his developer also move this code to local repository, commit. So they will commit the code, and from here everyone will push their code to central repository, and regularly they will pull the code from central repository to local repository in frequent intervals, every day 2 or 3 times. So pull. So this developer also pulls the code. So he is pushing he is pushing his changes, and at the end of the day or after few hours, so what will happen, he will pull the changes from the repository. So developer 1 will get developer 2. So developer 1 is making some changes, developer 2 is making some changes, so both are committed to central repository. So now developer 1 is making pull, so what will happen, so he will get the changes of developer 2 also. This developer 2 also making a pull from the central repository, so he will get the developer 1 changes also. So push and pull. So push means to move your changes from your local repository to central repository, and pull means to get the your central repository code to your local repository. You need to use git pull, git commit, git push, git pull. So these are the, and git clone, git init, git difference, git checkout. So there are different commands are there. We will discuss those things. So in this way, there is no problem of losing your code. If your central repository is also crashed, so it won't crash because it's a cloud based, but each developer will have his local repository, right? From there, you can revert the, means you can uh, get the code. That is the advantage of using Git and GitHub. But when it comes to centralized traditional system, so here, see, there is no recovery plan, only one repository. If this is crashed, everything is gone. But here in this architecture, so see, developer 1 is having his own repository, developer 2 is having, developer 3 is also having his own repository. So at the end of the day, they will commit the code to your GitHub. 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 So how they will move? So here to here commit, and here to here push. So developer 1 committed his changes and he pushed. Developer 2 committed his changes and he pushed. Developer 3 committed his changes and he pushed. So everyone's code is presented in your Git repository now. So now what they need to do? So every frequent intervals, they need to pull the code. He also pulls the code. So now if you use pull, what will he will get? He will get the all the code, wow, counted by developer 1, developer 2. And when he pulls, so a code will be coming from repository, centralized repository to his local repository. So he will get the code of developer 2 and developer 3. And when he pulls, he will get the code of developer 1 and developer 2 from the Git repository to his local repository. So everyone is having total project code. So there is no single point of failure. If developer's one system is crashed, so what he can do, he can get it from GitHub or from other developers. That's why it provides security to your project and there is no single point of failure. So this is the advantage of using Git and GitHub. So GitHub is, it's a centralized repository and Git is a version control system. So hope this is helpful, and in next video we'll talk about Git commands. Thank you.